But when we were doing for what let's call it, a channeling together, channeling our energy together, we sort of made the pact that we never leave each other, even when one person died. And when she did pass away, and as I mentioned to you, I was in the room when she was very sick and was literally dying. She was on morphine or whatever, and I saw her energy leave her body and stand in the left-hand corner of the room and look back at herself.
Yeah, so you saw that.
Saw that energy leave. Um,
So today's guest has over 50 years of experience in New Age spirituality. He has served in various roles such as advisor, consultant, healer, clairvoyant, and channel of spirit knowledge. From higher realms, his extensive knowledge and experience in modalities such as tarot, channeled guidance, meditation, and spiritual healing have made him an excellent guide to reach one's full spiritual potential. An experience with abundance in all aspects of life. So guys, I'd really like to welcome you, my guest, Graham White.
Thank you for that rather nice introduction.
Well, it's definitely one that's very needed because the books that you have written are just phenomenal. And today I wanted to dive into two of your books, and that is the first one called Metaphysical Mysteries Revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And this book you mentioned was almost 100% channeled. Yeah. And then your second book, Abundance with Your Higher Self, which you did not channel, you wrote that one yourself. I wanted to start the podcast by asking, when did you really get into all of this in the first place?
Well, I started in my very young youth. I don't think was a gifted person as such, but my father used to buy, this is in England where I used to live, used to buy a magazine called The Prediction, which was a publishing then, which was basically an astrology magazine that gave you your predictions for the month, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And he used to bring it into the bedroom when I was back from school, because I went to boarding school, and he said, "Oh, you should read your horoscope and see what it's like." So I used to do that, and then he introduced me to Madame Astra on the pier on Shanklin on the Isle of Wight, where we used to live. So he used to go and have his consultations about his businesses and what was happening to it. He said, "You should go along too." So I used to go along to that as well. So that was my first contact with a clairvoyant, which was always very interesting. And from there, I basically went up to London to work when I left school. And I found a bookshop called Foyles in Tottenham Court Road. And they had an occult section. And as soon as I got in there, I was pulling books out left, right, and centre.
There's no going back, right?
Yeah, no going back from there. And I started, with the normal things, tarot card reading and palmistry. And well, I couldn't get my head around astrology there. I thought that was just a bit too much. So that started me off on that road. And then I came to Australia, and I found the Adia bookshop, which is now closed, unfortunately. And I used to walk in there and I used to look at the books, and I just go and put my hand on one of the books and pull it out. And that was the one I used to read.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I gained a lot of knowledge from there. And then I met a spiritual healer. I was running a business at the time, and my sales manager, who was a friend as well, said to me, "You should really go and see Hayley. She's really good." So I thought, oh, well, why not? So off I went. And she used to do chakra energy healing. And that was my first introduction into clearing stuff in your life, emotionally, internally, through the healing. And also then I learned from her basically how to clear stuff from previous incarnations, which was really quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm very excited to dive into that later in this podcast.
And there was one incident that happened, which was mind-boggling. I couldn't get over it. Basically, she worked on me, and the situation was a dead end at the time. And I walked into where I was had to go to. I won't tell the story here because it take too long. And the reality was that that particular thing finished just within 2 hours of me seeing her.
Wow.
So it broke the cycle totally. So this made me realize that there was something more to this stuff than meets the eye. And I started studying other things, and I had a group of friends, and we used to meet and study various books. And I then we did an exercise together out of one of these books, which was where you communicated with a partner. So you picked a partner to work with, and you literally exchanged energy. Again, in my book Abundance with Your Higher Self, I actually talk about that, and I call it mutual healing. So basically, you're actually bringing the energy in, the conscious energy from your higher self, and you're channeling it to the other person, and you can work on them. But what I found with this was that actually you picked up on previous incarnations.
Wow.
And if the person was connected to you, which most of the time they were, because you wouldn't be doing it otherwise, you would actually relive those incarnations with that person. So that was fine, it was interesting. Then I met my second wife, and we practiced this stuff. And we realized that basically we had connections on many, many previous incarnations. And most of it was we were actually a couple in those incarnations.
Amazing.
One of them was actually in Scotland. I can remember that because she used to say I used to wear a kilt. I couldn't imagine that. So that made me realize that there actually is no separation between people. We all think there is, but there's an energetic energy that runs from all of us, and it affects all of us one way or another.
Yeah.
So it's how can I put this? It's a very we close ourselves off to this energy. We don't believe it exists. We believe we're individuals. We're actually conditioned by society
Mm.
that we're an individual. We have to stand on our own feet and whatever, and all this sort of stuff. But the reality is there is a connection, and of course, this connection is a very obvious one for instance, with mother and son, mother and daughter. That's a very obvious one that one can touch on. But that goes further. It goes to all of humanity. We're
Mm.
all connected one way or another, and sometimes we're connected to more to one person than we think. And in this case, with my second wife, this is what it was. This connection we had was incredible, quite frankly.
Yeah. Would you say that that's possibly a twin flame, a soulmate, or something a little more than that?
I think actually there's more than one soulmate or twin flame in this world for you. They're hard to find. But one thing I can tell you, which is quite interesting, when I was in my teens and living in London, I used to project out this energy looking for an energy that matched mine, and I do it on tube trains. I I just realized that just recently that that's what I was doing because I was thinking about this stuff after I was going to talk to you, and I thought this started a lot longer before I met my wife. So um, yeah, I realized I was actually projecting out this, looking for this energy to come back to me. So I was trying to match my energy with somebody else.
I wonder if you manifested her from a young age and you had to also go through your own journey in order to get through these barriers, open up before you two would had met.
Well, it's interesting. We met twice before we actually met.
Amazing.
I met her on Central Station in Sydney.
Yeah.
I was in my 20s and she was on the same platform.
Wow. And you're not from Australia either.
And she wasn't either. She's Greek.
Oh,
She
there
was
you
Greek.
go.
And I looked at her and I thought, oh, being at that age and being in that era, you realize that, you know, it's not like dating an Australian or an English person. There's a different culture around it. So I can
Yeah.
remember looking over it, and I didn't have the guts to go up and ask her out
Oh,
on a railway station. But it's interesting; she actually remembered it
yeah.
in discussion. She remembered that, and I would describe the dress she was wearing and all that stuff to her, and she said, "Wow!" So, and she remembered me looking at her. So there you go. So that one. But again, it happens a second time in a set of traffic lights in a car. And I looked across the set of traffic lights and she was opposite me. And she was in the outside lane, and I was the inside lane.
Yeah.
And she remembered that as well.
Amazing. You guys were destined to be together. There was
Yeah.
definitely universal energies bringing you together to do amazing things. That's for sure.
Anyway, so yeah, so finally we did get together, and I met her through business, which is funny. And I didn't like her when I first met her.
As you do.
No, it was quite interesting because she was a customer of my business, and I wasn't looking after that particular account. I had another guy doing it for me, and then he left, so I had to go and visit this particular business, and she was the one that ran it. And anyway, long story short, we got talking about stuff. In the end, we ended up having lunch together, and we were sitting over the table having lunch, and that's when it really started to happen. Suddenly, you realise there's this huge connection you can't quite work out.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And the reason I say this, there's more than one person that you could have this with, is because once she passed away, of course, I went into dating sites and met a lot of women and looked around, and I actually came across this energy several times. But most people are frightened to death of it. They run away from it because they don't
Yeah.
understand what's going on,
Mm.
which is fine. Anyway, so from there, we had a life together, and it was interesting. Interesting. The the spiritual side of life lasted about 2 years. I know that doesn't sound, and then things started to happen with families, etc. So life, for want of a better word, took over,
Mm.
and she actually got cancer and passed away. Do you want to hear the story? What should I mention to you on the net now
Yeah,
about?
I think the viewers would love to get some insight because this is quite interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, when we were doing the spiritual connection, we actually made it, and I tell you, when we made the spiritual connection, not when we went into business together, because that's what we did, and that's what basically shifted the energy, because we were going to very back into a very material world, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
And also on that, there were pressures from outside, from family, and that altered the whole energy construct. But when we were doing what let's call it, channeling our energy together, we sort of made the pact that we never leave each other, even when one person died. And when she did pass away, and as I mentioned to you on the mail, um, I was in the room when she was very sick and was literally dying. She was on morphine or whatever, and I saw her energy leave her body and stand in the left-hand corner of the room and look back at herself.
Yeah. So you saw that.
Saw that energy leave, um, And in to go back to the book, in the Metaphysical Mysteries, there's actually a section that's channeled that explains what happens when one passes away and how the energy leaves the body, etc. So that's, so I, in a sense, I experienced seeing it happen, but at the time didn't really know what was going on. And what happened was, basically she passed away within 10 minutes of that happening.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
That's a long time ago now. Anyway, that was fine. And then I started to hear a voice in my head all the time, and I thought, I'm going nuts.
Right,
It
right.
was like she'd never left. And I put up with that for about 4 months. But a lot of things happened, which I'll just mention to you. One thing was, I don't know if you understand, but in Greek Orthodox religion, they actually go back to the grave after, I think, 40 days, I think it is. So the person can actually leave the earthly plane and go to heaven, basically.
Oh.
And I I'm not psychic as in the visual sense, but I sense energy and movement. And at the time, the priest was waving his incensing and doing his Greek prayers,
Mm.
and, and I looked over at the grave, and there was her dancing on her grave, laughing her head off. You may think that's really strange, and maybe the viewers may think that's really weird, and maybe think I'm nuts. But I could feel it and whatever. I actually mentioned it to her son and her daughter, they're my stepchildren, and my son, my son actually said, I felt something too. So that was interesting. But I got to a point I couldn't stand it anymore, and I actually had to ask her to leave.
Mm.
And all I did was say, I said, we both need to get on with our lives wherever we are. So now
Mm.
I think it's time that you left. And she left. Literally just like
Wow.
that.
What an
Gone.
incredible journey. I
Yeah.
mean, that must have also been a little bit difficult for you at the time, having to still have her in your presence and still talking to you, above the grave. And, I can't imagine what that would have been like for you to even get through.
Well, in the end, it was actually too much. I just had to let her leave and start to grieve.
Yeah. And can I ask the part where she was dancing on her grave? Do you think that that was because she was just trying to send you a message that death is not what we think? She's quite happy, she's in her element. What do you think that meant to you?
Oh, that was the case. What she was saying to us, that the stuff that we had done together was very real.
Yeah.
And basically, there is an afterlife, and but what is that afterlife? And that was the beginning of her afterlife, for want of a better word. But again, in the Metaphysical Mysteries, the channel also explains about that and what happens to the consciousness and where it goes and what happens to it. So,
Yeah,
what part of it
definitely.
stays that mediums talk to? So, people who talk to people that passed away, what part of their consciousness is it, and all the rest of it. It's really quite interesting because there's a lot more to us than meets the eye.
And this is why I think your book is absolutely fantastic. And before we dive into some of the chapters in your book, I just wanted to ask you how you channeled it. What was the mechanisms going through your life at the time to be able to channel this information? Because it's quite remarkable.
It happened over a number of years, and I've actually had to revamp it in the sense that I had to put it into some order so it made some sense, so it flowed a little bit.
Yeah.
All the different stuff came through at different times, and it actually started before I met my second wife. Um, and I just made the notes. But basically, what happening was I would be starting to meditate in the morning, and because that's my time I meditate, and suddenly I would get told, "Oh, you need to get a pen and paper."
Right. And was that an audible voice that told you, or was that a knowing, a thought?
Well, everything came through into my mind. It's not so, this is it wasn't, hello, I want you to go and get right. It was in my mind. You need to go and get paper and a pen.
Right, right, right.
And I used to meditate, and then I come out of the meditation, and then we're going to talk about, and then the message would come. We're going to talk about this now. So I just had the pen and the paper, and it would just stream into my head, and I had to write so fast, really
Yeah.
fast, as it came in and whatever.
And that's what they call automatic writing. Is that right?
No, this wasn't automatic writing because it was in my head. But automatic writing, you put on your hand on the, and it does it does it on its own. This was
Right.
the dictation. It's like a dictation was coming through my head. I was writing it. It was stuff I didn't. There's no way I would know this stuff.
It's quite
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah. So so that's the way it used to happen. And then as time moved on, I would be meditating maybe, and I'll get a message come in my head. Oh, we're going to start giving you some new information in the next couple of days. So make sure you've got paper and pen near you.
Yeah. Hi guys, if you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to give it a like, share, and subscribe. And also, it would be great if you could tag 3 of your closest friends who would find value out of this content. And more importantly, please comment below your thoughts and how you've gone along your journey, as I'd love to hear from you all. But guys, I won't interrupt any further. Let's jump back into the video. Okay, Graham, let's dive into the first chapter of your book in Metaphysical Mysteries Revealed. I want to go through some of the things that you mentioned, and can you share some insights on what you understand about the collective consciousness and unconditional love? That's a great place to start in your book.
Well, we actually, how am I going to put this? I'm going to have to perhaps start with, we have a higher consciousness, a spiritual higher consciousness, which is broken into 3 parts: is the emotional higher self, the mental higher self, and the spiritual higher self. That is intact with our physical bodies. That's just through the aura of the etheric body. Beyond that, we have a multi-dimensional higher self, which is actually a form of collective consciousness. That is actually part of us that we don't actually tap into. Hardly anybody taps into on this planet. The higher self is the key to that place, but you have to know it exists. Now, from my perspective, I believe that the channeling now, and this is after I wrote the book, might add, actually comes from my multidimensional higher self. It doesn't come from anywhere else, because it has a lot of knowledge. And when you read the book, you'll realize it talks about that we actually lead more than one version of ourselves on different dimensions. So this consciousness that we have is a collective consciousness which creates a multitude of lives, circumstances, etc., etc. And this also includes the previous incarnations, like some people like to call it, but there is no time on that side, so it could be previous or future. It wouldn't make any difference to it, to your beingness on that side of that energy. I use the side. It's trying to express something in the linear values, and that is really hard in spirituality to do that. Because it isn't linear. It is actually around you. It's actually in you. It's part of you. And this is the big thing. It is part of you. So this collective consciousness has enormous energy, enormous knowledge, enormous power, for want of a better word, but is part of the all. And there are a lot of these collective multi-dimensional consciousness. I get it right in there.
Very well said.
There are lots of them. There's just not one of them. So our multi-dimensional consciousness is one of many. I don't know if I'll answer your question. I think I've gone right away from it, really. But anyway.
No, we're heading on the right path. So our multi-dimensional consciousness is one of many. Could you just explain that in a little better way for me to sort of understand where you're at there?
Well, in the book of actually what happened was they channeled a infograph for me to write, show it, which shows how it works and the
Awesome.
all that sort of down. So because they said you need a visual, because if somebody's reading this, they need the visuals. Words are not enough; they need a visual. So those multidimensional consciousnesses is part of the all, and I use the word all that there is. I changed that in the book. I've said I don't use the word God because God is used by organized religion.
Mm.
And I feel that takes away from what this is. It's about for want of a better word, the thing that is all that there is. Excuse me.
And that is what connects us all. That is the collective consciousness, the everything. That's everything that we are is all connected.
Yeah, look, absolutely. But so there's no as above as below, as they say, as it says. But everything is connected above, and it is connected to below. But it's also there is also separateness. I'll get the word right. Beings are separate because it's also a choice. So
Mm.
on this planet, we have choice. We have freedom of choice. All right,
Yeah.
our freedom of choice is manipulated, whether one likes it or not, because we're all pre-programmed, whether we like it or not. And the big programming at the moment is consumerism.
Yes, I heavily agree with that.
Um, and then you've got people who live totally out of their ego, which are people like dictators,
Mm,
wars, because it's all about them. It's not about anybody else. They don't care
that's
about
right.
anybody else. But everything is connected, interconnected. So everything affects everything in one way, form or another. But you can see there's always repercussions in the world from what happens somewhere else in the world.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'd like to take you to chapter 2, enlightenment. There's a lot of conversation about this topic, enlightenment. What is it and why must we have it?
Well, enlightenment is really living your life through your higher consciousness, your spiritual higher consciousness, which is connected to you in the physical now, which, but again, is mainly blocked. People just don't go
Mm,
there. And then moving from there to your multidimensional consciousness, that's real enlightenment. Because if you're living from your higher self, you're living a life that's, from want of a better word, is perfect or perfect for you spiritually.
mm,
That's the key word. Now, the book Creating Abundance with Your Higher Self is okay. Abundance is a lot of things. Most people with abundance is having a new Ferrari in the garage, having tons of money in the bank. But really, abundance is about a total of your life, not just part of your life.
mm.
Your emotional life, your mental life, your spiritual life, and your physical life. And in the book, I've tried to tackle that abundance in a Western society, and then translate it into a spiritual program which takes you to your higher consciousness.
Yeah, very fantastic. And I like to liken abundance to balance, really, what you've just explained. Everything and all things in every area of your life. It's not about that Ferrari or the money in the bank or that fancy house. It's about walking down the street and knowing that you have everything in balance and in motion and everything is peaceful. Is that correct?
It's what you need to live and to be able to then move your consciousness to another level. Because if you're
Mm,
living from another level, you're living only what is right for you.
yeah, fantastic. I love the subject on spiritual development. So, a chapter in your book covers that and why challenges are important in spiritual development. I'd love to know more about this. Can we have a conversation about spiritual development?
Well, let's talk about maybe just talk about challenges, because challenges are challenges and failure are actually the best things in life, because they actually
Mm,
teach you so much. The secret with challenges is if you're given a problem, is to face it and know what to do with it.
that's right.
And instead of saying, "Oh shit," excuse the expression, uh, "Oh, I've got this huge problem, I can't face it." If you sit down and then try and find a way around it, that's when a challenge is worth doing, because that will educate you and take you somewhere else. And it's the same with spirituality. Spirituality is about challenges. So you first of all you need to have the intent to do something. So you need to want to be spiritual. Then you need to take action to do it. You need to get knowledge next, and then you need to take action. So you basically have to gain some knowledge, and there are ways into that spirituality. And for me, it's been meditation and chakras. Basically, have been my way in. I'm actually sure there are other ways, but this is the way I've used, because it gives you a visual and a progression system.
Mm,
Because like anything else, nothing happens immediately. We're in a physical world, and therefore we're limited. If your consciousness, part of your consciousness lives on the astral plane, then things may happen much faster. A thought becomes reality very quickly. Where here, a thought takes time to develop, and then you have to put it into action, etc.
mm, yeah, yeah.
Does that answer your question? I don't think it does.
It definitely does, but you've made me want to dive into law of attraction because I do talk a lot about this, and I often like to get insights from different channelers, different people into spirituality. A lot of my guests, we do discuss this. So, what is your take on law of attraction, and how can we best understand it?
Easy. It misses the main ingredient: spirituality.
Yeah, yeah, understanding all parts of spirituality.
It doesn't take into account. It takes in the mental.
Mm,
And doesn't really take. It takes part of the emotional in, I guess, and it takes it in the physical. That's for sure. But it doesn't take in the spirituality of a human being,
mm,
because without that spirituality, what are we?
yeah.
I mean, the phrase "we're spiritual beings living in a physical body," I think is incredibly true.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I've had a lot of people on my channel who have had near-death experiences, and they all say the same thing. This is a school, we come here to learn. We're not really this body, this meat flesh. This is not who we are. We need to tap into our spiritual self, the all that we are. So I definitely agree with you, diving into spirituality to make law of attraction even work in the first place.
Well, the point is, it will work to a point,
Mm,
and then not life take over circumstances. And I've used some examples in creating the abundance, actually, of what I did once, using those techniques without adding spirituality.
mm,
I got what I wanted,
right.
and I paid a price,
Oh, okay. And how do you mean you paid the price for that?
because I didn't dot the T's and dot the T's and dot the I's, and I was coming from a selfish personal point of view.
Right, right, right. So if you want to manifest that which you
It's
want, you do have to cross the T's and dot the I's. You have to be really specific on what you want. You have to be in the right mind frame of that which you want, because you got to,
and it has to be for the good of all involved.
yes, otherwise that's where karma comes in.
Yeah. So I always, again, it always should be for your highest good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And you definitely answered my question there. So moving on to chapter 22. Um, I believe it's really important that we should really take this topic more seriously. And I've spoken about this before. You wrote about the dangers of manipulation of the subconscious by media and multimedia systems. Why is this important to understand?
Because we're being controlled.
Exactly.
If we work through our, again, I have to keep on going back to this point. If we can move our mind and our beingness to our higher spiritual self, when we view the world totally differently, because
Mm,
we're coming from a different space. So that multimedia, well, it will affect you unless you don't listen to it at all. So as you turn off the radio, don't go on Facebook, don't go on Twitter or whatever it is your
mm,
favorite media is, you're being manipulated, and you see it. You can actually see it. So it's so obvious when you look at, say, USA, where how basic their politics is, so broken,
yeah.
and how people are thinking. It becomes so obvious. So it's all done. It's you're programmed, and you've been programmed since you've been a kid. You program
Mm.
by your parents, by your teachers, by your friends, whatever happens. So all that stuff has affected you to the way you think. So if you can move your mind and your consciousness to another space, then you can change that.
Yeah, and something that I want to point out, I did have a conversation with Christian Sundberg, and he mentioned that, we do have a level of responsibility to where we guide our and direct our attention. We're talking about 2 million people dying on the news, and we're focusing on that, and that's damaging to your psyche and your life as it is. We should be focusing more on the positives in life, because that's going to create our reality. So whatever it is we're watching, whatever we're listening to, whatever we're perceiving in our reality is going to become our reality. So, with all of this programming and conditioning going on, is there a way that we can break free of that programming and break free of that conditioning and create a better life for ourselves? And also, is this going to help the collective consciousness moving forward?
That's a very complicated question.
Yeah.
Ah, I keep on going back to the same thing.
Yeah.
Uh, the basic things is what what the first book says, Metaphysical Physical Mysteries says. Basically, we are much more than we think we are. Um, we are much more powerful than any AI will ever be, but we have to move our consciousness to another level. Once we move our consciousness to another level, e.g., one's higher self, one's multidimensional self, everything changes, because
Mm.
our whole focus of our minds, our subconscious and our conscious minds, change. Now, one of the things I've started to do in my meditation is I now state that and I've been doing this for a while, my subconscious and my conscious mind is linked to my spiritual higher self and the various levels. And then I actually then say my spiritual higher self is linked to my multidimensional self. And although this is not, this is not a magic thing where suddenly you become super spiritual. It's something that happens over a period of time, because your multidimensional self and your higher self will only give you what you can handle.
Yeah, because I do understand it can get quite interesting.
It can be overwhelming
Mm.
till you can accept it. So I keep on going back to the same thing. I'm saying, basically, if you can start to get your consciousness to be in those higher spiritual realms, that will circumvent, for want of a better word, that programming.
Well, I
It's
guess I'm
more
going
powerful.
to,
And
I
then,
think I'll just ditch the notes for a second and ask the right question, because you did mention it's very rare to be able to tap into that part of us.
yeah.
How can we do this? I mean,
Well, again, that's again book 2, create abundance with your higher self. I give you a lot of tools.
Yeah,
I give
yeah,
you I
definitely.
give you tools to get there. It's not the whole answer because I actually stopped it at one place. I decided that I had to. I stopped. I thought I can't give too much. I think it's too much. And I got a message the other day that some more stuff is about to be being given to me about the multidimensional higher self and what it's all about. I don't know what yet because I haven't got it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm
So
definitely interested to find out. Well, let's leave that question for our next session because the viewers here watching, we will be covering another book in another episode. So we will get back to the notes here. Moving on to a different chapter, and this is one that I'm very interested in, and that's chapter 24, Spirit Guides. Who and what are they?
spirit guides can be various in various forms. Some can be benevolent, and some can be unbenevolent.
As above, so below.
Um, and in that book, it gives you a chart of the different levels of creation on this planet. And I'm talking now in a esoteric point of view of above and below, and the middle is the physical.
Mm.
So you can channel a guide that is above or below. And if it's below, it's all about control.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's like the vibrational
Yeah.
sequences, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's above, it normally is um, a positive thing. But you have to remember again, it's probably done because they are getting something out of this as well as you.
Yeah, I have heard that whatever happens on Earth here is also happening in the universe, so on and so forth. So, they're helping us, but it's also helping them.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, you can probably have, I mean, there are people talk, for example, to the Palladians or whatever they are, star galactic people or whatever, and that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that or whatever, but there's another side of the whole thing as well. It's it's not one-sided.
Yeah, but
I
definitely.
think that's the right word. So yeah, they can be positive or they can be positive or negative. But when it's negative, you get things what like things like called walk-ins. Have you heard what a walk-in is?
Right. So I didn't know that that was negative because I have spoken to a walk-in, I think two of them,
Yeah.
and a friend of mine who's a psychic medium, she became a walk-in for about 4 months, and then she's no longer a walk-in. But yeah, let's dive into that.
Well, it's basically a consciousness that walks into and control and takes over your mind.
Yeah, yeah, because from what I've learned about a walk-in is that when you do have a soul walk-in, you're no longer the person you were before. And family members, friends, they'll start to notice this isn't the same
Yeah.
person, their life will change, they have different partners, like everything about this person is completely different.
Yeah.
But from my belief and my understanding on what I thought a walk-in was it was just your higher self, another aspect of yourself that was guiding you on a different path. Am I
Not
wrong?
necessarily, because basically you got to remember that if you're not living your life or coming from that place in your life, then you're open to other things.
Right, right.
I'll tell you a story about I did a class with my healing lady friend back in the day where we did past life therapy, so called past,
Awesome.
and it's a little bit away from what we're talking about, but it gives you an idea. Um, and in this, I went back and I saw myself standing on a rock. I was wearing leather sandals, and I looked down, and I was in basically a Roman tunic. And I was standing on this rock with a sword, and I was literally slaughtering people.
Oh,
And anyway, what happened was we finished the session, but I didn't release that particular energy.
Right.
I walked around for a week feeling aggressive, angry, and I could have killed somebody.
Wow, that's very interesting. And
So
how did you clear that?
I went back to see my healing friend.
Uh,
I wasn't
so
able
Wes,
to at that time, so I went back. I actually rang her and I said, "Well, this is what's happened. You better come in quick." So
right,
she made an appointment. I came in. We got rid of that basic energy, which was sitting in my consciousness. It hadn't left.
right. And another question I would like to add to that is, would protection be something that we would need to start to look into when we dive into past life regressions, or energy clearings? Is that something that we should do if we do dive into these?
The past life regressions, you need to be able to close off and clear it before when you finish.
Yeah,
Really, real. It's not my area of expertise, by the way,
yeah.
but you need to be able to close yourself off in the right way, or the person doing it for you or helping you needs to be able to close you off and see
Mm,
your aura, move it out of it, and see your aura. You've had the experience, you've kept the knowledge. That's fine, but you need to move that energy out of you again because that energy hasn't gone away; it still exists.
yeah, that's right.
So when you pass over, a part of you still exists on the astral for a very long time. Not all of you, this is what it's the part of the personality lives there.
Mm.
And that is what you bring in.
So with that, with our past lives, is there any way that we can work on clearing that? Is it lessons that we may not have learned that is stuck in our consciousness? Um, you
Well,
know,
basically, your multidimensional higher self does all that for you. It works out exactly what you need and what you don't.
mm,
And I used to call it the super consciousness, but it's like for another word, it's like a supercomputer in a sense. It basically has all this knowledge and wisdom that it has brought in from all the incarnations, including the one you are now. And this is the problem what people can't handle. There is more than one of you.
yeah,
There's multitudes of previous incarnations. So you're really actually part of a very complex being, for want of a better word.
right, right.
Although you feel singular here in this physical world, you're actually not. You're part of something much bigger.
Do you
And, that,
think
and
that
that's a lot of people don't like that because it basically takes you away from your ego.
Yeah, and you said everything. Well, I don't think you mentioned this, but everything that I've learned is that there is no time. Everything is happening simultaneously. There are multiple infinite versions of our reality, which is what we were kind of just speaking about. One of the questions that I love bringing up with my friends is it possible to quantum jump into a better reality? Like, is this a possibility? Does this ever happen? Um,
Well, there's in one of the chapters in Metaphysical Mysteries, there's a bit about double gangers,
right.
where some you were another version of you appears somewhere else and you're not there.
Wow.
My grandmother, for example, when I was a boy, said, she said, and I wasn't at home, I was somewhere else. And then she said to me, "Oh, but you were down the street 10 minutes ago."
Right.
I said, "I wasn't there." And she said, "But it's definitely you. I saw you." And in the book, the channels tell me that this is really basically where something emotional, dramatic emotion is happening on one dimension or the other, and part of that consciousness drifts into this reality.
Mm.
So the answer to that question is yes.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because so I have a roommate living with me And I know we had a really great conversation, a really good conversation on spirituality. And he's not very spiritual.
Yeah.
He listens to things that I talk about, and we do have conversations on it, but it's very, anyway, I had a memory that we had a really good conversation, and I had a conversation with him in the car the other day about this. I'm like, do you remember this and that? And he's like, no, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, we really had this conversation. How can you not remember that? And so I wonder if that's the same thing that's happened to me.
Well, it might be. I don't know.
Yeah. And another experience I've recently had. So I was driving to my roommate's house, his old place. We had to go and pick up some things. And, he's lived in that place for about 2 years or so, coming in and out of that house over and over again. As we went into his house, I noticed a tree there that I've never noticed before. And my son, as I was thinking it, my son said it. So I didn't actually voice that. My son then said, I've never noticed that tree before. And so that's another thing that got me to start thinking, what's going on here? So yeah, I thought I'd mention that.
I don't know whether I can help you with that one.
Yeah.
Look, there's so many different aspects that happen in life that, like what you went through, and you have to question it. You've got no choice but to.
All right, so I wanted to dive into what happens when you leave your body during the death experience, and what happens to your consciousness after death.
What happens? What I got channeled, what happens, and I gave you my experience earlier on of what I saw. But what actually happens is that the etheric body and the chakras, the energy from the chakras, leave from the top of the head. And with it, it takes another part of your mind, which is actually, I call the spiritual mind, which is where all the memories are restored. It's like a backup.
Right.
So that leaves through the head. And when you die, basically, it severs itself.
Is that the silver cord they talk about?
Yeah, the cervical cord, it severs itself from the physical. Um, the person experiencing the death at the time, I've written in the book, there are various scenarios what happen depending on where that particular person's consciousness is in this life. If they're spiritual or have knowledge, then basically it's a different situation if they don't have any at all. Because there's one that's called the blank syndrome, where you just die and it's blank until you then become consciously aware on the other side. And there are
Yeah.
ones where, like, for example, the light version, you might have heard that one where you
Oh, multiple times. Yeah.
see that one. There are several ways, and there are one where you can literally stand out the side of the body and watch yourself die.
Yeah, see, that's fantastic. And that's what I love to talk about because, the death experience is not as scary as we make it to believe it.
Yeah,
A lot of people before they actually die, before their physical body actually dies, they're out of their body watching it.
yeah.
So that's fantastic.
They know what's happening, and the other side of it is they're quite often surrounded by other energies. And in the in the book, it talks about how these energy it calls it energy balls, for one way, or energy like globes, and
Mm.
and you recognize them as people you knew. They may not be just loved ones; they can be somebody you had a beef with on this planet. The reason being is it was part of your karma, and basically you made the agreement to go through this particular circumstances in life. So it wasn't a question of they actually well, it was a thing which was they loathed and hated you. In fact, it was all prearranged. So basically, they were part of your existence, and therefore it was moving their lives and your lives to a different level. So,
Right.
so they actually treat you with love where you didn't expect, where you didn't get it on this planet. If you get my drift.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And a lot of people's soul contracts, I've come to learn that if you were a horrible nasty person in one life, or a murderer, or whatever, in this life, you're now going to be a light worker in order to give love to make up for what you did in a past life. What do you think about that?
Again, I go back to your super consciousness or your multidimensional consciousness. It will decide what is needed, and it will put it
Right.
where it needs to put it. It may not be in this particular physical life,
Mm.
be in another physical life, or it could have been in one of the other many the other versions of yourself.
Right, right.
All about creating the perfection.
That's exactly right. Well, look, I absolutely love that you came here today to share your knowledge, your wisdom, share your backstory, which I think was quite incredible. To end this podcast, I would love to ask you if you could leave us with a positive message if you haven't already done so.
The positive message is that basically none of us are separate. We belong to each other. We just have to accept that we are part of something more than just ourselves living in the physical.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for the viewers watching this video, Graham, how can they find you? How can they find your books?
Well, my book's on Amazon. It's Creating Abundance with Your Higher Self, a spiritual journey that encounters abundance.
Beautiful, beautiful. And if they would like to reach out to you, as many people do, would you like me to add your Facebook or social media on this video, or
They can go to
email?
they can go to the Facebook page, which is my author page. So it's Graham White Author on Facebook. Or they can go to Spiritual Discoveries on Facebook.
Awesome, awesome.
They're both on there. So yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. And I can't wait to have you back to share part 2 of your second book. And until then, you have a fantastic day.
All right, thank you very much.
Awesome. Bye, Graham.
Bye.